The stars looked different from the bridge of the New Hope. Admiral Jake Morrison had been staring at them for 30 years, but they still reminded him of the stories his grandfather told about Earth's night sky. 300 years had passed since the Voethek Empire drove humanity from their home world, declaring them too dangerous to exist among civilized species. The Empire called humans unpredictable, violent, and incapable of following proper galactic order. They were wrong about humanity being incapable, but they might have been right about the dangerous part. Jake walked through the corridors of the massive colony ship, past families who had never seen Earth but still called it home. Children played games their great-great-grandparents had invented, while adults worked jobs that kept their floating civilization alive. The New Hope wasn't alone anymore. Dozens of human ships drifted through the Outer Rim territories, far from Empire space, building something the aliens never expected them to build. Captain Lisa Hayes stood in the intelligence center, studying holographic displays showing Empire fleet movements. Her team had been tracking alien ships for months, noting patrol patterns and communication frequencies. The Empire thought humans were extinct or scattered beyond any ability to threaten them. They conducted their business as if humanity had never existed, which made gathering information remarkably easy. "Admiral, you need to see this," Lisa said as Jake entered the room. The display showed a section of space near Haven Prime, one of the frontier worlds where humans had built a small settlement. Empire scouts are heading directly toward our people. They'll arrive in 18 hours. Jake studied the tactical display. 3 Empire vessels, probably a routine patrol checking systems they rarely bothered to visit. The ships weren't heavily armed by Empire standards, but they carried enough firepower to destroy a civilian settlement without breaking stride. "How many people on Haven Prime?" 12,000, Lisa replied. "Mostly farming families and mining operations. They have basic defenses, but nothing that could stop Empire warships." Commander Ryan Blake joined them at the display. For 15 years, Ryan had been training human civilians in combat tactics, turning farmers and teachers into soldiers. Every human settlement had similar training programs, because everyone knew this day would eventually come. The Haven Prime Defense Force has been preparing for this scenario. They know what to do. Jake nodded slowly. The Empire expected to find helpless refugees if they ever encountered humans again. Instead, they would discover something far more dangerous. Humans who had spent 3 centuries learning, growing, and preparing for exactly this moment. Doctor Amy Foster burst into the intelligence center, her face flushed with excitement and worry. "Admiral, the long-range sensors are picking up energy signatures from Haven Prime. It looks like our people are powering up systems we've never seen before." Amy had spent decades reverse engineering salvaged alien technology, but the settlements had been working on projects even she didn't know about. The main screen shifted to show Haven Prime's orbital space. What had appeared to be simple mining platforms and communication arrays were transforming, unfolding like mechanical flowers. Hidden weapon systems emerged from asteroids, where humans had been secretly building defenses for years. The settlement wasn't just ready for the Empire's arrival. It was eager for it. "Get me a communication channel to Haven Prime," Jake ordered. Within moments, the weathered face of Colony Administrator Ben Parker appeared on screen. Ben had been a cargo pilot before the exile, but 30 years of frontier life had turned him into something harder. "Admiral Morrison, we've been expecting this call," Ben said with a grim smile. "Our spotters confirmed Empire movement 6 hours ago. Everything is ready. Ben, you don't have to do this. We can evacuate your people before the Empire ships arrive. With respect, Admiral, we've been waiting 300 years for this chance. Every person on Haven Prime volunteered to be here. We know what this means." Ben's image flickered as power fluctuated through the settlement systems. Besides, running isn't really the human way, is it? Jake understood. Humanity had been running for centuries, always staying one step ahead of empire expansion, never making waves, never drawing attention. But running forever wasn't survival. It was just a slower form of extinction. What do you need from us? Just watch and learn, Admiral. We're about to show the Empire what humans have become. The Empire ships dropped out of hyperspace exactly on schedule, their massive hulls reflecting Haven Prime's sunlight. The lead vessel, a Vorthic heavy cruiser, immediately began scanning the planet's surface. Jake could imagine the alien crew's confusion as their sensors detected massive energy signatures and weapon systems, where their intelligence reports showed only a primitive farming colony. Captain Zelnak of the Empire Cruiser Dominant will opened a communication channel to the planet's surface. His translated voice carried the typical Vorthic arrogance. Unknown settlement. You are in violation of Imperial territory markers. Prepare for inspection and possible relocation. Ben Parker's response came back immediately. Empire vessel, this is Haven Prime Colony. We decline your inspection. We also decline relocation. We suggest you leave our space immediately. The alien captain's laughter came through the translation system as a harsh buzzing sound. Primitive species, you do not understand your situation. Prepare for boarding or face destruction. We understand our situation perfectly, Ben replied calmly. The question is whether you understand yours. The Empire ships moved into attack formation, their weapons charging with the casual confidence of predators approaching helpless prey. The aliens had done this countless times before, overwhelming inferior species with superior technology and firepower. It was a routine they had perfected over centuries of conquest. Then Haven Prime opened fire. The hidden weapon platforms unleashed energy beams that no Empire scientist had ever seen before. Human engineers had spent decades studying captured alien technology, not just copying it but improving it, combining different species innovations in ways the Empire's rigid thinking could never imagine. The mining lasers that had carved tunnels through asteroids had been modified into weapons that could slice through Empire armor like paper. The Empire ships' shields flickered and failed under the barrage. Their return fire struck defensive barriers that absorbed and redirected energy using principles the aliens didn't recognize. Within minutes, the dominant will was drifting powerless, its crew frantically sending distress signals that human jamming systems, prevented from reaching Empire space. Jake watched the battle from the New Hope's bridge, feeling a mixture of pride and dread. Humanity had just announced its return to galactic politics in the most dramatic way possible. There would be no more hiding, no more running, and no more pretending they were harmless refugees. The Empire would respond with overwhelming force, but Jake found himself smiling anyway. Let them come. Humanity was ready. High Commander Zeltar dismissed the Haven Prime report with a wave of his scaled hand. The Vorthic leader had ruled the Empire's military forces for 60 years, crushing rebellions and expanding territory with methodical precision. In his experience, defeated species sometimes managed one desperate victory before reality crushed their hopes. The humans had been extinct for generations anyway, so the report had to be wrong. Increase patrols in Sector 7, he ordered his aide. Some primitive species probably found old human weapons and got lucky. Send a proper fleet to clean up the mess. 3 star systems away, Captain Steve Parker crouched in the ventilation shaft of an Empire communications hub. The facility processed messages for dozens of worlds, routing orders and intelligence through secure channels that the aliens believed were impossible to breach. Steve had been studying Empire technology for 20 years, ever since human scouts first captured an intact communications array. Breaking their codes had taken another decade, but now humans could read Empire messages as easily as their own. Steve planted the last of his devices in the main server room, tiny machines that would copy every message while adding their own data to the stream. The Empire would soon learn that their secure communications had been compromised for years, but not until humanity was ready for that revelation. He slipped back through the maintenance tunnels, past alien guards who never imagined someone could penetrate their most secure installations. Lieutenant Colonel Nina Brooks coordinated the operation from her hidden base on Meridian Station. The old mining platform had been abandoned by the Empire decades ago, making it the perfect location for humanity's intelligence network. Screens around her displayed data from agents scattered across 50 star systems, each one gathering information about Empire movements, technology, and weaknesses. Steve's signal just came through, reported communications specialist Karen Mills. The package is delivered and active. We're now receiving real-time Empire military communications from the central hub. Nina smiled as classified messages began, appearing on her screens. Fleet movements, supply schedules, personnel transfers, and most importantly, the Empire's response to Haven Prime. They're sending Admiral Crexmore with the 5th Battle Fleet, 12 heavy cruisers, and 40 escort vessels. They still think they're dealing with a minor uprising. Engineer Tony Cruz worked in the construction bay of the New Hope, supervising the final assembly of humanity's new warships. The vessels looked nothing like traditional human designs or Empire craft. Tony had studied the advantages and weaknesses of every known alien technology, then created something entirely new. The ships were smaller than Empire cruisers, but faster, and more maneuverable, designed to fight in ways the aliens couldn't predict or counter. The stealth coating is responding perfectly, Tony told Admiral Morrison during the inspection. Empire sensors will have trouble detecting us until we're already in weapons range. The new engines give us twice the acceleration of their fastest ships, and the armor uses layered materials from 6 different species. Nothing in the Empire arsenal was designed to penetrate this combination. Dr. Kevin Lann presented his psychological analysis to the Human Leadership Council. Years of studying captured Empire personnel and intercepted communications had revealed crucial weaknesses in alien thinking. Their hierarchical society makes them predictable, he explained. Each species has rigid command structures and predetermined responses to different situations. They can't adapt quickly to unexpected tactics because their training doesn't allow for improvisation. Major Helen Stone reviewed the tactical data from her command post. Human forces had been quietly positioning themselves throughout Empire space for months, using stolen transport codes and forged identification to move undetected. Small teams of specialists waited on dozens of worlds, ready to strike when the signal came. All units report ready status, she informed Admiral Morrison. We have assets in position to hit supply depots, communication centers, and administrative facilities across the Empire's core regions. The aliens have no idea we've been living among them for years. The breakthrough came when Dr. Amy Foster finished analyzing the Empire's central computer systems. Human agents had been downloading data from alien networks for decades, building a complete picture of how the Empire operated. The revelation was stunning. The entire galactic civilization was more fragile than anyone had imagined. They're completely dependent on centralized control, Amy explained to the assembled human commanders. Every decision goes through layers of bureaucracy. Every order requires authorization from higher authorities. If we disrupt their communication networks and command structures simultaneously, they won't be able to coordinate a response. Admiral Morrison studied the intelligence reports from across Empire space. Humanity had spent 3 centuries learning, growing, and preparing for this moment. They had turned exile into opportunity, using their freedom from Empire oversight to develop technologies and tactics no alien could imagine. Most importantly, they had learned to work together in ways the hierarchical Empire could never match. The aliens made one crucial mistake, Morrison told his staff. They assumed we would stay the same species they exiled 300 years ago. Instead, we became something new, something they're not prepared to fight. News of the Haven Prime incident finally reached Emperor Vorthik himself. The ancient reptilian ruler had conquered hundreds of worlds and enslaved dozens of species during his long reign. No enemy had ever posed a serious threat to his empire, and he saw no reason to believe these mysterious attackers would be different. Deploy the 4th and 7th battle fleets, he commanded. Sterilize every world in the target sector. If some primitive species wants to play with weapons they don't understand, we'll remind them why the Empire rules the galaxy. The Empire's response was exactly what humanity had expected. Overwhelming force supplied without subtlety or imagination, following tactics that had worked for centuries against every other opponent. But humans weren't like other species. They had studied their enemies for generations, learning not just how to copy alien technology, but how to surpass it. Captain Steve Parker's communication devices activated across Empire space, flooding their networks with false orders and contradictory intelligence. Supply convoys found themselves rerouted to empty systems, while military units received orders to stand down. Just as human strike teams hit their targets, the Empire's vast military machine began turning against itself, following corrupted orders that seemed to come from legitimate sources. By the time alien commanders realized their communications were compromised, humanity's real attack had already begun. From hidden bases throughout the galaxy, human forces emerged to strike at carefully selected targets. They didn't attack military installations or heavily defended worlds. Instead, they hit the infrastructure that kept the Empire functioning: communication relays, supply depots, administrative centers, and transportation hubs. The message was clear. Humanity had returned, and they were no longer the frightened refugees the Empire had banished centuries ago. They were something far more dangerous, an enemy who understood exactly how the Empire worked and precisely how to tear it apart. Emperor Vorthik the Conqueror stood on the bridge of his flagship Eternal Dominion, watching the massive Imperial fleet prepare for battle. 500 warships stretched across space, the largest force he had assembled in decades. The ancient Vorthik ruler had personally crushed 43 rebellions during his reign, and each victory had followed the same pattern: overwhelming force applied with ruthless efficiency until the enemy surrendered or died. These humans think they can challenge the Empire with primitive tactics, he told Admiral Crexmore. We will demonstrate why no species has successfully opposed us for 800 years. Destroy every human settlement, capture their leaders for public execution, and remind the galaxy what happens to those who defy Imperial authority. Admiral Jake Morrison watched the Empire fleet's approach from his command ship, Liberty's Edge. The human vessel was 1/10 the size of the Emperor's flagship, but Jake felt no fear as he studied the tactical displays. The aliens were doing exactly what human intelligence had predicted, massing their forces for a decisive battle, following strategies that had worked against every previous enemy. All human ships report ready, announced Communications Officer Curl Price. Strike. Groups Alpha through Omega are in position. The trap is set. Commander Rachel Stone led the first wave of human fighters as they swept toward the Empire fleet. Her squadron of 30 small craft looked insignificant compared to the alien armada, but appearances meant nothing in modern space combat. Each fighter carried weapons designed specifically to exploit weaknesses in Empire ship design, guided by pilots who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Remember the plan, Rachel told her pilots. Hit fast, hit hard, and get out before they can target you. These aliens think in straight lines. Show them what three-dimensional warfare really means. The human fighters attacked from 6 different directions simultaneously, using speed and maneuverability to avoid the Empire's heavy weapons. Their tactics confused the alien gunners, who were trained to fight opponents that approached in orderly formations. Instead, the humans swarmed like angry insects, striking vulnerable points before disappearing into space. Dr. Sam Mitchell monitored the battle from his laboratory aboard the New Hope, watching as his adaptive weapon systems proved their worth. Each human ship carried technology that could adjust to different alien defenses in real time, analyzing enemy shields and armor to find the most effective attack methods. The Empire's standardized equipment became a liability when fighting an enemy that could adapt faster than they could respond. "The frequency modulators are working perfectly," Sam reported to Admiral Morrison. "Every time they adjust their shields to block our weapons, we shift to a different energy pattern. They can't keep up with the changes." Colonel Ben Walsh led the ground assault teams that had infiltrated Empire supply ships during the confusion of battle. While the aliens focused on the space combat, human soldiers moved through their logistics vessels like ghosts, planting charges and gathering intelligence. The Empire's rigid security protocols assumed attacks would come from obvious directions, leaving them vulnerable to enemies who thought creatively. Charges set on 12 supply ships, then reported through encrypted communications. When these go off, the Empire fleet will lose 40% of their ammunition and fuel reserves. They'll have to retreat or face running out of supplies in the middle of battle. The Empire's response was predictably massive and unimaginative. Admiral Crexmore ordered his heaviest ships forward, trying to use superior firepower to crush the human forces through brute force. The alien strategy had worked against hundreds of species, but humans had spent 3 centuries studying these exact tactics and developing counters for each one. Commander Luke Davis guided his stealth ships through the Empire formation, using advanced cloaking technology to remain invisible until the last moment. The human vessels struck at the alien fleet's command ships, targeting communication arrays and sensor systems to blind and confuse their enemies. Without reliable communications, the Empire's rigid command structure began to collapse. "Their formation is breaking apart," Luke reported as explosions bloomed throughout the alien fleet. "The admirals can't coordinate their ships anymore. They're firing on their own vessels in some sectors." Captain Megan Clark coordinated the human ships that had been hidden among the asteroids surrounding the battlefield. For weeks, human engineers had been modifying space rocks into weapons platforms, creating a maze of hidden defenses that the Empire scouts had never detected. When the aliens moved into attack positions, they found themselves surrounded by enemies they couldn't see until weapons fire began tearing their ships apart. Intelligence Officer Dan Cooper watched from his monitoring station as the Empire's communications networks failed under the coordinated human assault. Years of infiltration and sabotage finally paid off as alien commanders lost contact with their fleets. Supply lines collapsed, and carefully planned strategies dissolved into chaos. "Their entire command structure is failing," Dan announced. "Half their fleet is operating on outdated orders, and the other half doesn't know what they're supposed to be doing. Emperor Vorthik has lost control of the battle." The Emperor himself stood in stunned silence as his massive fleet fell apart around him. For 8 centuries, the Empire had won through superior numbers and technology, crushing opposition before it could develop effective resistance. But the humans fought like no species he had ever encountered, using tactics that turned Imperial strengths into weaknesses. "How is this possible?" Vorthik demanded as another of his battleships exploded under human fire. "They're just primitives with stolen technology. Our forces outnumber them 50 to 1. Admiral Morrison's image appeared on the Emperor's communication screen, transmitted through systems the humans had compromised long ago. The human leader looked calm and confident, showing none of the fear that previous enemies had displayed when facing Imperial might. "Emperor Vorthok, this is Admiral Morrison of the Human Federation," Jake said formally. "Your fleet is defeated. Your supply lines are cut, and your communications are under our control. I'm offering you one chance to withdraw from this system and return to your territory. Refuse, and we'll destroy what remains of your forces." The Emperor's rage filled the bridge of his flagship. No primitive species had ever dared to threaten him directly, and certainly none had possessed the power to make such threats meaningful. But as he looked at the tactical displays showing his shattered fleet, Vorthok realized he was facing something unprecedented, an enemy that had studied the Empire's weaknesses and developed specific countermeasures for every Imperial advantage. Battle was over, but the war was just beginning. Humanity had proven they could defeat the Empire's military forces, but now they would face the full wrath of a galactic civilization that had never accepted defeat. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the war room of the Liberty's Edge, surrounded by holographic displays showing the entire galaxy. Red markers indicated Empire strongholds, while blue dots marked human positions. For the first time in 3 centuries, humanity was no longer hiding. General Kate Phillips joined him at the central display, her weathered face showing the determination that had kept human resistance alive during the darkest years of exile. "The Empire is mobilizing everything they have," Kate reported. "Intelligence suggests they're pulling forces from every sector, including their border defenses against other hostile species. Vorthok is betting everything on crushing us before we can spread our rebellion to other worlds." Jake nodded as he studied the tactical situation. The defeat of the Emperor's personal fleet had sent shockwaves throughout Imperial space, but it had also revealed humanity's true capabilities to their enemies. The Empire would not underestimate them again, which meant the real war was just beginning. Commander Luke Davis materialized from the stealth section, still wearing the specialized suit that made him nearly invisible to Empire sensors. His teams had been infiltrating alien installations for months, but their most important mission was about to begin. "Admiral, Operation Revelation is ready to commence. We have agents in position on 47 Empire worlds, all waiting for the signal." Dr. Carol Price worked frantically in her laboratory, putting the finishing touches on weapons designed to counter specific alien species. The Empire controlled hundreds of different races, each with unique biology and technology. Human scientists had studied them all, developing targeted solutions that could disable alien equipment while leaving their operators alive but helpless. "The neural disruptors are calibrated for Vorthok brain patterns," she explained to the assembled commanders. "The sonic weapons will incapacitate the insectoid Zephyrians without permanent damage. We can neutralize entire populations without the mass casualties that would turn other species against us." Captain Megan Clark coordinated with the network of human sleeper agents scattered throughout Empire territory. For decades, humans had been infiltrating alien society by posing as members of other species. Advanced surgical techniques and genetic modifications allowed them to pass even close inspection, gathering intelligence while building the infrastructure for eventual rebellion. "Agent Phoenix reports from the Vorthok homeworld," Megan announced. "The Imperial Council is in emergency session, debating whether to negotiate with us or launch a final extermination campaign. Our people in their government buildings are recording everything for later use." Intelligence Officer Dan Cooper revealed the scope of humanity's infiltration network. A main display showed communication lines connecting thousands of human agents across the galaxy, each one positioned to provide crucial intelligence or sabotage key installations when the time came. The Empire had unknowingly harbored their enemies for generations. "We don't just have spies in their military," Dan explained. "Human agents are working in their factories, their research facilities, their transportation networks, and their administrative Centers. We know more about how the Empire operates than most of their own leaders do. The revelation that would change everything came from an unexpected source. Dr. Amy Foster had been analyzing data from the captured Empire communication hub when she discovered something remarkable hidden in their archives. The Empire's own records contained evidence of massive discontent among the conquered species, rebellions that had been suppressed and forgotten, but never truly eliminated. "Look at this," Amy said, projecting historical data for the command. Staff to see. The Empire has been fighting constant rebellions for centuries. The Carathians attempted independence 6 times in the past 100 years. The silicon-based crystallites have never stopped resisting imperial rule. Even some Vorthic colonies have tried to break away from central control. Jake realized the implications immediately. Humanity wasn't just fighting the Empire. They were fighting for the freedom of every species that had been conquered and enslaved over the centuries. The rebellion could become a galactic revolution if they played their cards correctly. Major Alex Turner led the assault teams that struck simultaneously at 50 Empire installations across 20 star systems. The attacks were precisely coordinated to cause maximum disruption while demonstrating humanity's reach and capabilities. Supply depots exploded, communication centers went dark, and administrative facilities found their computer systems corrupted with human viruses. All targets hit successfully, Alex reported as the last strike team completed their mission. The Empire's logistics network is paralyzed, and their response capabilities are degraded by at least 60%. They'll need weeks to restore normal operations. Commander Julie Baker coordinated the space battle that erupted when Empire reinforcements arrived to protect their damaged installations. The alien fleet was larger than the previous one, but human tactics had evolved during the weeks of fighting. Small, fast ships struck from unexpected angles, while larger vessels used new weapons that the Empire had never encountered. Their shields can't adapt to our rotating frequency attacks, Julie announced as another Empire cruiser lost power and began drifting helplessly. Every time they modify their defenses, we switch to a completely different weapon system. They're fighting yesterday's enemy, while we're already planning tomorrow's battles. The breakthrough came when human agents successfully contacted leaders of the oppressed species within Empire territory. The Carathians were the first to respond, followed quickly by the Crystallites and several other races that had been waiting for someone capable of challenging Imperial dominance. The rebellion was becoming a revolution. 17 species have agreed to coordinate their resistance efforts with ours, reported communications specialist Linda Parker. They're providing intelligence about Empire weak points and preparing their own forces for simultaneous uprisings. The Empire will be fighting on hundreds of fronts at once. Emperor Vorthic watched his empire begin to crumble from his throne room on the Imperial capital world. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy, describing coordinated attacks, system failures, and the emergence of human forces in sectors where no humans should exist. The species he had dismissed as extinct primitives had somehow built a network that spanned the entire galaxy. How many humans are there? He demanded of his intelligence chief. How did they infiltrate our territory so completely without being detected? The answer terrified him more than any military defeat. Humanity hadn't just survived their exile. They had thrived, multiplied, and spent 3 centuries preparing for this exact moment. The Empire faced an enemy that understood their weaknesses better than they understood themselves, supported by allies they had created through centuries of oppression and cruelty. Jake Morrison's final message to the Empire was broadcast simultaneously on every world under Imperial control. The transmission cut through their most secure networks, appearing on screens in government buildings, military bases, and civilian centers across thousands of star systems. People of the galaxy, Jake began, his voice carrying to billions of beings who had never heard of humanity. The Empire has ruled through fear and oppression for too long. Today, we offer you a choice. Stand with us and reclaim your freedom, or watch as we tear down the system that has enslaved you all. The revolution has begun, and nothing will ever be the same. The imperial capital world of Vorthek Prime burned with the light of 1,000 battles as the final confrontation began. Admiral Jake Morrison led the combined human and allied fleet toward the heavily fortified planet, knowing that this single engagement would determine the fate of every species in the galaxy. Emperor Vorthek had gathered the remnants of his vast armada for one last desperate stand, transforming his homeworld into an impregnable fortress that had never fallen to any enemy. Captain Paul Garcia commanded the ground assault forces as they prepared for the most dangerous mission in human history. The Imperial Palace complex was protected by energy shields, automated defense systems, and the elite Vorthek Guard units that had never been defeated in combat. But Paul's troops were no ordinary soldiers. They were volunteers who had trained their entire lives for this moment, carrying weapons designed specifically to penetrate every defense the Empire could deploy. All strike teams report ready, Paul announced over the tactical network. Remember, our goal isn't destruction. It's transformation. We need to capture the Imperial leadership alive and preserve the government infrastructure for the transition period. Commander Diane Foster led the space battle above the planet's surface, coordinating attacks against the orbital defense platforms that surrounded Vorthek Prime. Her ships used hit-and-run tactics to avoid the massive firepower of the fixed installations, while slowly degrading their capabilities. The battle was a deadly dance between mobility and overwhelming force, with humanity's adaptability facing the Empire's raw power. Focus fire on the communication arrays, Diane ordered her squadron. Leaders, if we can isolate the ground defenses from orbital control, the assault teams will have a much better chance of reaching their objectives. Dr. Peter Martinez watched from his mobile laboratory as the weapons he had designed proved their effectiveness against the Empire's most advanced defenses. Years of studying alien technology had allowed him to create countermeasures for every system the Empire possessed, turning their own innovations against them in ways their designers had never imagined. The shield disruptors are working perfectly, he reported to Admiral Morrison. Each pulse is causing cascading failures in their defensive grids. The orbital platforms are losing power faster than they can reroute from backup systems. General Susan Ward coordinated the simultaneous uprisings that erupted across hundreds of Empire worlds as the battle for Vorthek Prime reached its climax. The oppressed species that had waited centuries for this opportunity finally struck back against their overlords, supported by human weapons and tactical advice that gave them advantages they had never possessed before. Reports coming in from every sector, Susan announced. The Korathians have liberated their homeworld. The Crystallites have seized control of the mining colonies, and even some Vorthek military units are joining the rebellion. The Empire is collapsing from within. The breakthrough came when human infiltrators successfully penetrated the Imperial Palace's central command center. Agent Miller had spent 15 years posing as a maintenance worker in the building, slowly mapping every security system and defensive measure. When the assault began, she was perfectly positioned to disable the shields protecting the Emperor's throne room. Palace defenses are down, she reported through her concealed communicator. Repeat, the Emperor is now vulnerable to direct assault. All teams proceed to final objectives. Captain Paul Garcia led his soldiers through the corridors of the Imperial Palace, fighting past automated defenses and Vorthek Guard units that had never retreated from any battle. The human troops used tactics that confused and demoralized their enemies, advancing through routes that the palace's designers had considered impossible to navigate under combat conditions. Throne room secured, Paul announced as his team burst through the final set of barriers. We have the Emperor and his command staff in custody. The war is over. Emperor Vorthik stood defiant, even in defeat, his ancient eyes burning with rage as he faced the human soldiers who had accomplished the impossible. For 800 years, his species had ruled the galaxy through military might and technological superiority. The idea that primitive humans could overthrow his empire seemed like a nightmare that couldn't be real. "You may have won this battle," he snarled at Admiral Morrison when the human leader arrived in the throne room. "But ruling a galaxy is far more difficult than conquering it. The Empire exists because it provides order and stability. Without us, the galaxy will descend into chaos and war." Jake Morrison looked around the opulent throne room, seeing the symbols of oppression that had dominated countless species for centuries. But he also saw the potential for something better, a future where diversity would be celebrated instead of crushed under imperial uniformity. "You're right that ruling is harder than conquering," Jake replied calmly. "That's why we're not going. To rule, we're going to help every species govern themselves while working together for mutual benefit. The age of empires is over." The transition began immediately as human administrators worked with representatives from dozens of species to establish the new Galactic Federation. Unlike the Empire's rigid hierarchy, the Federation was designed to give each race genuine autonomy, while providing frameworks for cooperation and mutual defense. Former imperial worlds voted overwhelmingly to join the new organization, attracted by promises of freedom and self-determination. Dr. Amy Foster led the teams that began converting imperial military technology for peaceful purposes. Weapons became tools for construction and exploration, while warships were transformed into vessels for trade and scientific research. The massive resources that the Empire had devoted to conquest and oppression were redirected toward improving life for all. Galactic citizens. "We're not just changing governments," Amy explained to the Federation Council during its first session. "We're changing the entire philosophy of how civilizations interact. Instead of the strong dominating the weak, we're creating a system where every species contributes their unique strengths to benefit everyone." The former emperor watched from his comfortable prison as his empire became something he couldn't understand. Species that had been enemies for centuries began working together on joint projects. Technologies that had been restricted to imperial elites became available to anyone who needed them. Most confusing of all, the humans who had defeated him showed no interest in taking revenge or establishing their own empire. Jake Morrison addressed the first session of the Galactic Federation Council, looking out at representatives from hundreds of species who had gathered to build a new future together. The humans who had been exiled as too dangerous to exist among civilized species were now helping those same species create a civilization based on cooperation instead of domination. 300 years ago, the Empire declared humanity too unpredictable and violent to exist in their ordered galaxy. Jake said to the assembled delegates, "They were right about us being unpredictable. They just never imagined we might be unpredictably peaceful, unpredictably generous, and unpredictably willing to fight for the freedom of species we had never even met." The final scene showed children from dozens of different species playing together in parks on worlds throughout the galaxy. Human children laughed alongside young Korathians, Crystallites, and even Vorthik youngsters whose parents had chosen to join the Federation rather than cling to the past. The differences between species had become sources of wonder and learning rather than fear and prejudice. The galaxy was still vast and dangerous, filled with challenges that would test the new Federation for generations to come. But for the first time in centuries, every species had hoped that their children would inherit a better future than the past they had known. Humanity had returned not with conquest, but with the promise that no one had to face the darkness alone.